Welcome students. Today we will discuss about the topic collective bargaining. In industrial dispute between the employee and employer can also be settled by discussion and negotiation between these two parties in order to arrive at a decision. This is also commonly known as a collective bargaining. As both the parties eventually agree to follow a decision that they arrive at after a lot of negotiation and discussion. So, according to Beach, collective bargaining is concerned with the relations between unions, reporting employees, and employer or their representative. It involved the process of union organization of employees, negotiations, administration, and interpretation of collective agreements concerning wages, hours of worker, and other conditions of employees arguing in concerted economic action. Dispute settlement procedure. So, according to Flippo, collective bargaining is a process in which the representative of a labor organization and the representative of a business organization meet and attempt to negotiate a contract or agreement which specify the nature of employee employer union relationship. Or you can say that a collective bargaining is a mode of fixing the terms of employment by means of bargaining between organized body of employees and an employer or association of employees acting usually through authorized agents. The essence of collective bargaining is bargaining between interested parties and not from outside parties. Now we will discuss about the characteristics of collective bargaining. There are some salient features of collective bargaining, like it is in group action. Yes, collective bargaining is a group action as opposed to individual action. Both the parties of settlement are represented by their groups. Employer is represented by its delegates, and on the other side, employees are represented by trade union. It is a continuous process. Yes, collective bargaining is a continuous process and does not end with one agreement. It provides a mechanism for continuing an organized relationship between management and trade union. It is a process that goes on for 365 days of the year. Collective bargaining is a two-party process. Both the parties, employers and employees, collectively take soon action. There is uh, no intervention of any third party. It is a mutual give in and take rather than take it or leave it method of arriving at the settlement of a dispute. It is collective bargaining is a process in the sense that it consists of a number of steps. The starting point in the presentation of charter of a demands by the workers, and the last step is the reaching of an agreement or a contract which would serve as the basic law governing labor management relations over a period of time in an enterprise. It has fluidity. There is no hard and fast rule for reaching an agreement. There is a simple scope for compromise. A spirit of give and take works unless final agreement acceptable to both the parties is reached. Collective bargaining is based on a principle of industrial democracy where the labor union represent the workers in negotiations with the employer or employers, or industrial democracy is the government of labor with the consent of the governed the workers. The principle of arbitrary unilateralism has given way to that of self-government in industry. So actually collective bargaining is not a mere signing of an agreement granting seniority, vacations and wage increase by sitting around a table. It is relatively a new concept and is growing, expanding and changing. In the past, it used to be emotional, turbulent and sentimental, but nowadays it is a very scientific, factual and systematic. So collective bargaining is not a competitive process. Labor and management do not cooped while negotiating for the same object. It is essentially a complementary process. Each party needs something which the party has. So, namely, labor can put greater productive efforts, and management has the capacity to pay for that efforts and to organize and guide it for achieving the enterprise objective. The behavioral scientists have made a good distinction between distributive bargaining and integrative bargaining. The former is the process of dividing up the cake, which represent what has been produced by the joint effort of management and labor. So in this process, if one party wins something, the other party too continue the metaphor of the cake. So has a relatively smaller size of the cake. So it is a win-lose relationship. The integrative bargaining, on the other hand, is the process where both the parties can win, each party contributing something for the benefit of the other party. Collective bargaining is an art, an advanced form of human relations. Now, there are major objective of collective bargaining like to promote cordial and harmonious relationships between the employer and employees. It is also very to protect the interest of both employer and employees, and it very foster to create a industrial democracy to keep the third party at bay. Collective bargaining ensures that trade union is given due recognitions to prevent unilateral actions of management or to arrive at mutually beneficial settlements. Now, importance of collective bargaining. The importance of collective bargaining is basically the collective bargaining advances the mutual understanding between the two parties, employees and employer. So, the role of collective bargaining may be evaluated from the different point of views like management point of view, labor point of view or social point of view. So, the first of all, we will discuss about the importance from the management point of view. The main object of the organization is to get the work done by the employees at work at minimum cost and thus earn a high rate of profits. Maximum utilization of workers is a must for the effective management. For this purpose, cooperation is required from the side of the employees, and collective bargaining is a device to get and promote cooperation. The labor disputes are mostly attributable to certain direct or indirect causes and based on rumors and misconceptions. So, the collective bargaining is the best remedial measure for maintaining the cordial relations. The importance of collective bargaining from the employees or labor point of view or trade union point of view. Labor has a poor bargaining power. Individually, a worker has no existence between labor is perishable and therefore the employers succeed in exploiting the laborers. So, the working class in united form become a power to protect its interest against the exploitation of employers through the process of collective bargaining. The collective bargaining imposes certain restrictions upon the employer. Unilateral action is prevented. All employees are treated on equal footings. The condition of employment and rates of wages as specified in the agreement can be changed only through negotiations with labor. So, employer is not free to make and enforce decision at his will. Collective bargaining can be made only through the trade union. Trade unions are the bargaining agents for the workers. The main function of trade union is to protect the economic and non-economic interest of workers through constructive programs, and collective bargaining is one of the devices to attain that objective through negotiation with the employers. So, trade unions may negotiate with the employer for better employment opportunities and job securities through collective bargaining. Next importance of collective bargaining from the society point of view. Collective bargaining leads to industrial peace in the country, which in turn help to increase the pace of a nation's efforts and towards economic and social development. It helps in implementation of labor legislation. So government is also concerned with the process of collective bargaining. Government passes and implements several labor legislations, desires it to be implemented in their true sense. If any person violates the rule and laws, it enforces them by forces. So collective bargaining prevents the government from using the force, because an amicable agreement can be reached between employer and employee for implementing the legislative provisions. Labor problem shall be minimized through collective bargaining, and industrial peace shall be promoted in the country without any force. Collective bargaining is a peaceful settlement of any dispute between workers, employers, and therefore it promotes industrial peace and higher productivity, resulting an increase in the gross national product or the national income of the country. Now, essential conditions for success of collective bargaining, or you can say that prerequisites for collective bargaining. So, existence of a strong representative trade union in the industry that believes in constitutional means for settling the disputes, the existence of a fact finding approach and willing to use new methods and tools for the solution of industrial problem. The negotiation should be based on facts and figures, and both the parties should adopt constructive approach. The existence of strong and enlightened management which can integrate the different parties, that is employees, owners, consumers, and society or governments. So agreement on basic objective of the organization between the employer and the employee and on mutual rights and liabilities should be there. In order that collective bargaining functions properly, unfair labor practices must be avoided by both the parties. Proper records for the problem should be maintained. Collective bargaining should be best conducted at plant level. It means if there are more than one plant of the firm, the local management should be delegated proper authorities to negotiate with the local trade union. So there must be change in the attitude of employers and employees. They should realize that differences can be resolved peacefully on negotiating table without the assistance of third party. No party should take a rigid attitude. They should enter into negotiation with a view to reaching an agreement. Or when an agreement is reached after negotiation, it must be in writing, incorporating all terms of the contract. It may be emphasized here that the institution of collective bargaining represents a fair and democratic attempt at resolving mutual disputes. Wherever it becomes the normal mode of setting out standing issues, industrial unrest with all its unpleasant consequences is minimized. Now, types of collective bargaining. When looking at the types of collective bargaining, it is important to distinguish it between a collective agreement. There are also different types of collective agreement, but these refers to the outcome of the collective bargaining. For instance, there are single union deals, procedural agreements, substantive agreements, and partnership agreement, all of which refer to the agreement that has taken place as a result of the collective bargaining process. So, first type of collective bargaining is a distributive bargaining. Distributive bargaining is defined as a negotiation process by which one party benefits at the other expense. This usually refers to the redistribution of incomes in the form of higher wages, higher bonuses, or higher financial benefit. So, simply put, anything related to the transfer of money. In this type of bargaining, the trade union needs to have enough market power to win the negotiation. The employer will want to pay as little in wages at in order to convince them to pay more. So the trade unions need enough members to provide a significant incentives. A trade union that has 100% of the employer's workforce has significant power. Should they call a strike, it would cause severe disruptions to the employer. So, consequently, any distributive bargaining will be skewed significantly in favor of the union. Second type of a collective bargaining is a integrative collective bargaining. It is whereby both sides aim to benefit in what is seen as win-win bargaining. Both parties may bring together a list of demands by which an agreement is reached that benefit for both the parties. So, to put it another way, integrative bargaining involves both parties considering the other's point of view, needs, wants, fears, and concerns. As a result, both parties either lose or gain by the same amount. For example, union may advocate for greater level of staff training. Now this may cost the business more, but it will benefit from greater level of productivity in the long run. If workers are better trained, they are equally going to be more productive. So the business and the unions workers may gain as a result. We can also look at integrative bargaining where both sides lose in order to gain. For example, the union may be willing to give up early bonuses in order to have a higher annual salary, or alternatively, the union would accept a pay freeze in order to accept better working conditions. So the workers would lose out from lower real wages, whilst the employer which would have to invest in better condition. Another type of collective bargaining is a productive bargaining. Productive bargaining involves both parties negotiating and productivity and pay. So, union may suggest that higher salaries would boost productivity. However, this is known to the business. So, target oriented bonuses may be suggested or new ways of improving the process. Union may suggest new ways of organizing the workforce then may increase productivity and therefore create value to the firm. In turn, employers would look to increase employees' wages as a result. Simply put, productivity bargaining is where the two parties look to agree to change that would boost productivity in return for higher wages or higher benefits. Another type of collective bargaining is a composite bargaining. Composite bargaining refers to a negotiation that focuses on a number of elements that are not related to pay. They are generally related to the employees' welfare and job securities. For instance, it covers factors such as working conditions, policies, recruitments, and disciplinary processes. The aim is to ensure a mutual beneficial long term relationships between the employer and employee. It does this by highlighting issues that employees may have which may impact their long term future at the company. Business want to retain talent, particularly if they spend time and money training them up. Factors such as a workload and working conditions can impact on this long term relationship. So it is in the best interest for both parties to ensure that the employees are happy. Next topic is a process of collective bargaining. There are three distinct steps in the process of collective bargaining: the creation of the trade agreement, the interpretation of the agreement, and the enforcement of the agreement. Each of these steps has its particular character and aim, and therefore each require a special kind of intellectual and moral activities and machineries. First of all, the creation of a trade agreement. In negotiating the contract, a union and management present their demands to each other, compromise their differences, and agree on the conditions under which the workers are to be employed for the duration of the contract. The coverage of collective bargaining is very uneven. In some industries, almost all the workers are under agreement, while in other, only a small portion of the employees of the firms are covered by the agreement. So, the negotiation process is the part of collective bargaining more likely to make headline news and attract public attention. Wages increases are announced, ominous predictions about price increases or reductions in employment are made. The administrative process is the day-to-day application of the provision of the contract to the work situation. At the time of writing the contract, it is impossible to foresee all the special problem which will arise in applying its provision. Sometimes it is a matter of difference interpretation of a specific clause in the contract. Sometimes it is a question of whether the dispute is even covered by the contract. Nevertheless, each case must somehow be settled. So, the spirit of the contract should not be violated. Proper and timely enforcement of the contract is very essential for the success of collective bargaining. If a contract is enforced in such way that it reduces or nullifies the benefit expected by the parties, it will defeat basic purpose of collective bargaining. It may give rise to fresh industrial disputes. So hence the in the enforcement of the contract, the spirit of the contract should not be violated. New contract may be written to meet the problems involved in the previous contract. So furthermore, as day-to-day problems are solved, they set precedents for handling similar problems in future. So such precedents are almost as important as the contract in controlling the working part conditions. In short, collective bargaining is not an on and off relationship that is kept in cold storage and except when new contracts are drafted. Now, advantages of collective bargaining. Perhaps the biggest advantage of this system is that by reaching a formal agreement, both sides come to know exactly what to expect from each other and are aware of the right they have. This can decrease the number of conflicts that happen later on. It also can make operations more efficient. Employees who enter collective bargaining know they have some degree of protections from employer retaliations or being let go from the job. If the employer were dealing with just a handful of individual, he might be able to afford to lose them. When he is dealing with the entire workforce, however, operations are at risk and he no longer can easily turn a deaf ear to what his employees are saying. Even though employers might need to back down a little, this strategy gives them the benefit of being able to deal with just a small number of people at a time. So this is very practical in large companies where the employer might have dozens, hundreds or even thousands of workers on his payroll. Working with just a few representatives also can make the issues at hand seem more personal. Agreement reached through these negotiations usually cover a period of at least a few years. So people therefore have some consistency in their work, environment and policies. This typically benefits the company finance department because it knows that fewer items related to the budget might change. On a broad scale, using this method well can result in more ethical way of doing business. It promotes ideas such as a fairness, equality. For example, these concepts can spill over into other areas of a person's life, inspiring better general behavior towards other. Now, disadvantages of collective bargaining. A major drawback to using this type of negotiation system is that even though everyone gets a say in what happens, ultimately the majority rules will only a few people determining what happened to many. This means that a large number of people, particularly in the general workforce, can be overshadowed and feel like their opinion doesn't really matter. In the worst case scenario, this can cause severe division and hostility in the group. Secondly, it always requires at least two parties. Even though the system is supposed to pull both parties together during the process of trying to reach an agreement, people can adopt us versus them and mentality. When the negotiations are over, this way of looking at each other can be hard to set aside, and unity in the company can suffer. Collective bargaining can also be very costly, both in terms of time and money. Representatives have to discuss everything twice, once at the small representative meeting and again when they relay information to the large group. So paying outside arbitrators or other professionals quickly can run up a fairly big bills, and when someone else is brought in, things often get slower and more complex because even more people are involved. So some people point out that this technique have a tendency to restrict the power of employers. Employees often see this as a good thing, but from the company's perspective, it can make even basic processes difficult. It can make it a challenge to deal with individual workers, for example. So the goal of the system is always to reach a uh, collaborated agreement, but sometimes tensions boil over. As a result, one or both parties might feel they have no choice but to muscle the other side into giving up. Workers might do this by going on a strike, which hurts operations and cuts into profits. So, businesses might do this by stacking lockouts, while prevents members of the workforce from doing their jobs and getting paid, negatively affecting income and overall quality of living. So, union dues are sometimes an issue. They reduce the amount of take home pay a person has, because they usually are deducted right from his paychecks. When things are good in a company and people don't feel like they are getting anything from paying the dues, they usually become unhappier about the rate. So the idea of collective bargaining emerged as a result of industrial conflict or dispute and growth of trade union movement, and was first given currency in the United States by Samuel Crompers. In India, the first collective bargaining agreement was conducted in 1920 at the instance of Mahatma Gandhi to regulate labor management relations between a group of employers and their workers in the textile industry, Ahmedabad. Thank you, class.